Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a 23-year-old competitive bowler from Canada, currently living in Montreal. Welcome back to the COMPCLIMB training series, where I record most of my training, provide in-depth analysis of every session, and just chat about climbing with an emphasis on competition. So I'm going to keep this mini program breakdown as brief as possible because this is obviously a super long episode, as you can see. But I wanted to kind of just talk a bit about this week, like this couple week lead up into the North American Cup, because this is kind of like our couple weeks of peaking and tapering for the event. And I've gotten a few comments like asking if I can talk about like how I try and peak and taper for like a target competition. So this is a good opportunity to talk about it. But yeah, I'll try to keep it brief, like I said. And if you're not interested, you can just use the timestamps to fast forward for our first session of bouldering, which is going to be taking place in Salt Lake City, which is very exciting. And we're climbing at the Salt Lake City Bouldering Project. But for now, let's do our kind of mini program breakdown. So obviously we had just our normal training was up here in these few weeks of training where the volume is quite a lot higher. And then we had this rest week right before our alley up sessions. And then basically after this rest week is when we started to really gradually lower the volume of the training. So as you can see, like the first thing you'll notice, like very basically, just as we're getting closer to the North American Cups, you just see sessions get shorter and shorter, and then eventually sessions will disappear as well. So in this first week of training, actually this first week here is the same training as these previous weeks. So I wanted to have one more of these core training weeks where we, do our classic double day bouldering, probably usually do a boulder session in this session, and then our workout is still kind of at a 2-rep range, and then we're doing still 6 sets of our hangs. But then as we move into this week, we see the training switches up quite a lot. So our boulder sessions in the last half of the week are at a maximum of 1 hour instead of 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I was like very, very good at keeping the volume, like not going over time, especially when we're trying to peak and taper. It's very important that I'm actually controlling the amount that my body is working out and exerting itself. And so I can't be going overtime in like these sessions. So yeah, obviously our boulder sessions get shorter and shorter. And then what's also important is, especially for hangboard, I find is like very, very important to taper and help me peak and help me feel like I'm like really strong in my fingers going into a competition. So up here, we were doing like 6 sets of our hangs for 1 rep. And then as we're getting closer to the competition, 6 sets turns into 5 sets here. And then I had to do 1-arm hangs on this day, if you remember, because I didn't have access to weight. But in theory, this would be still the regular 2-arm hangs. And then like right before the event, we just do sort of 3 sets of our hangs, and we try to go as heavy as possible, which we do in this episode. I do like some 123-pound hangs. And then obviously we don't do 2 sessions right before the competition. So the reps of all of our exercises and our workouts obviously taper off. Like they just gradually get lower and lower and lower, and we bump up the weight heavier and heavier and heavier, so that basically we're less fatigued because we're doing less volume, but we're doing heavier reps, which is basically getting our body accustomed to exerting itself harder and feeling stronger, which is exactly what we want to do at a competition. We want to be exerting at our maximum strength. And so that's why by actually forcing ourselves to do heavier and heavier weights, that's how we achieve this effect basically. And then what I like to do is I like to just have 1 day of rest before the competition. Some people like 2, some people like even 3 sometimes. But I find 1 day of rest works for me as long as I really just barely do anything in the couple days leading up to the event. So as you can see, we're only doing 1 session on these last 2 days of training right before the competition. I don't remember the last time I did just 1 session in a day. And this always feels super, super nice when we're peaking, to just go to the gym, do 1 session, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm done for the day. I don't have to do anything else. And then your body feels this effect too. And I find I really achieve some really nice freshness going into a competition when I'm so used to doing double sessions. And then all of a sudden I just do 1 session a day, like a pretty short session. And this helps me feeling like really, really fresh going into a competition. And that is also not the only reason I do it. The arguably even more important reason is to really make sure that I achieve perfect skin going into a competition. And I've actually got a couple questions about this in the comments as well. I've been constantly complaining about pink tips in the training recently, and people will say like, okay, well, how do we make sure this doesn't happen right before the comp while still trying to train effectively? And all you got to do is just really cut down your volume and really minimize the amount of climbing we do. And this week is dedicated to feeling fresh and making sure my body is in prime condition in terms of skin, in terms of freshness, everything. So by doing one session on these 2 days, I really got my fingertips into perfect condition. Like there's too much skin, there's too little skin, and then there's the perfect right in between. So it's not too thick where it's like glassy and slippery, but it's also not too thin where it's like super sweaty and pink. So right now I have like perfect skin. These couple weeks of training, or like this like tapering and lowering of the volume, I have achieved perfect skin, which I'm very happy about going into the competition. So anyway, I guess the moral of the story is, if you are trying to peak yourself or trying to taper and achieve kind of like, you know, some new strength for whatever it is, for a competition, for like an outdoor trip, the moral of the story with peaking is taper down your volumes, lower your reps of your exercises that you do, lower your sets, but increase the weight, and then also lower the either amount of sessions that you do or the duration of the session. Or I personally don't prefer to add more rest days. I like to just cut the volume down. That's kind of a preference of mine because it helps maintain sort of the groove of training. But by cutting down the volume of the sessions, of the duration of the reps, you achieve the freshness and the strength you want. So my personal recommendation would be to not actually add more rest days on like a tapering or a peak week, just to cut down the volume. And then like just gradually cut it down until like the week or a couple days that you want to achieve this peak. That's kind of how I go about it. And that's what we were doing right now for the Salt Lake North American Cup. So anyway, I hope that was pretty brief. I tried to keep it as brief as possible. So let's jump into our sessions now. We're going to be doing some training at the Boulder project in Salt Lake City. So here we are, fast forwarding to our second day of training here in Salt Lake at the Boulder project. So for those who didn't watch the program breakdown, I just mentioned how the first day of training, while we were here in Salt Lake, Maddie and I went to a gym called The Front, and I did 2 sessions of bouldering there, and they were like really light, easygoing sessions to just get my body moving again after the intense day of travel, and also to just kind of move around and get used to the altitude. So for those who don't know, Salt Lake City is at about 4,400 feet altitude, which is definitely something. I think the stat is like when a place is at 4,000 feet elevation above sea level, that's when you really start to feel it, and it will impact athletic performance. And Maddie and I have definitely been feeling the effects of the altitude, definitely in these first few days. Like, even just walking up and down the stairs, I'll find myself getting out of breath. So in yesterday's day of training, I took it super light. I was just kind of sticking to easy boulders and moderate boulders, and I was definitely feeling not so good yesterday, just getting back into the rhythm of it. So I was interested to see how today would go, even just after one day of acclimating. And today was definitely a bit better than the first day. The first day I couldn't even really try any hard boulders. I was just felt like very fragile and very stiff, and the travel day really messed me up. But today was definitely better for sure. I was actually able to try some moderate to hard boulders today. And yeah, like I mentioned, we are climbing at the Salt Lake City Boulder project. So I think the Boulder project is like a chain of gyms all throughout the US, if I'm not mistaken. And I've definitely heard of this gym chain, but I'd never been to one before. And I was very impressed with this gym. It was super, super cool. It's just a very cool gym, honestly. When I walked in, the layout of the gym is like very big, and there's a lot of bouldering, and it just kind of hits you in the face when you walk in. Like, bah, here's a really cool boulder section. As you can see, yeah, it's got these big, massive walls filled with boulders. I definitely enjoyed my sessions here. And the grading here, I guess they go kind of by hold color. So all of the white boulders are like the hardest boulders in the gym, and then the pink is the second hardest. I think, though, the white boulders kind of have a big grade range. Like it's like V8 plus for the white boulders, which was kind of tricky to maneuver sometimes. Like, especially in these first few sessions, I was like, oh yeah, it might be nice to stick to some moderate boulders, but it was kind of a guessing game with the whites sometimes. But even though when I first started the session, I probably started off feeling at like a 6 or 7 in terms of strength. I was still definitely found myself getting back to it, but I found that the session got better as than it was in the warm-up. My warm-up was a bit shaky, but it just took a bit longer to reach my sort of peak of feeling good in the session. And I think that just kind of happens with the altitude. I find that it just takes a really long time for your body to really get going, and for your sort of cardio system to catch up with what your body is doing. And I can really feel this altitude. It's very easy to sleep here. Like, every time we go to bed, Maddie and I are just knocked out immediately and go into a super deep sleep, which is actually quite satisfying. And I can just feel the first thing that I noticed actually when I started climbing, even yesterday and today on this day, was my legs feel heavy as well. That was something that I really noticed. And so, yeah, I'm glad that Maddie and I came to Salt Lake about a week early to really acclimatize to the altitude, because it is really important to get used to it. You definitely don't want to fly in the day before and then have to compete with the altitude smacking you right in the face. I've competed at Vail a few times, and Vail is actually, I think it's just over double the elevation of Salt Lake, and it really messes you up. And I didn't go early enough to Vail in the past, and I really regretted it. So I have learned from my past trips to Vail, and I'm trying to correct that mistake, and that is why we got to Salt Lake nice and early. I think a week should be kind of the perfect amount of time to get used to the elevation of 4,000 feet. When we go to Vail, we're probably going to go even earlier, because Vail is 10,000 feet or maybe even a bit higher. So we'll definitely need a little bit extra time to acclimate to Vail, even more so than Salt Lake. So yeah, this session of bouldering here was just kind of okay, let's start hopping on some harder boulders and really activate my body's maximum power levels and start getting ready to compete. I find that I don't put too much emphasis on my performance in these sessions when we're trying to acclimate and get ready for a comp, even though you'd think that I would, because we're about to have to perform at a competition. But I find it's important to actually treat these sessions as more of activation, and really not putting too much pressure on how I'm actually climbing and judging my performance on all these boulders. It's really just more important to activate the body and get it as primed as possible to compete on the weekend. So as you can see throughout this session, we're kind of I'll try some of these physical boulders, and then if I don't send them, I'll just move on quickly, because like I said, we're really not trying to perform in these sessions. It's more just about getting the body activated. And one of the best ways to do that is to go around and try a whole lot of different boulders and try as many moves as possible and get as much variety as possible. So we're not going to be having sort of our classic projecting sessions that we've had in previous weeks, where I'll just like find one or two of the hardest boulders in the gym and project it for, 30 minutes plus each. This session, I was trying to be very deliberate in trying lots of different boulders, really activating the body, getting lots of different movement patterns, firing and ready to go for the comp on the weekend. And I found that the boulders in this gym were pretty perfect for this, actually. Luckily, they didn't have that many like super hard boulders up in the gym, so I didn't really even have the opportunity to get caught up in a single boulder and work it for a long time. I was finding that the white tape boulders were all kind of in the like around the V9 range, which was pretty much perfect for what I needed for this session. So I'm glad we came to the Boulder project and got to try these boulders that were like really, really good for what I wanted to do. Like, we have some comp style boulders that we'll get to, but then there's also like a lot of physical boulders that were good for just activating like my grip strength and just all of sort of my muscles throughout my body, which were feeling pretty dormant and stiff from the travel, the altitude, all of these things. And so at this point in the session, it was time to move on to some slab boulders. And I was actually very psyched to climb slab at this gym because they had a lot of good looking slabs up. Also, you can see we're being joined by Molly Dreyer, who was actually in a video a while ago. She is a young crusher from Ontario and a friend of Maddie and mine, and she's competing in the North American Cup as well. So we were climbing with her today at the gym, and we'll also be joined later in the session by Babette Roy as well. So yeah, this gym, like I was saying, had a lot of really good good looking slabs up, and I was very excited to get my slab skills activated and try and like really get my balance nice and freshly activated in my mind. I find it's especially important to climb on slab like right before competition and have the muscle memory really, really fresh in your mind. So they had a lot of good looking slabs to achieve this effect. Like, as you can see with this slab that Molly is cruising her way up through, it's got some really nice movements, some kind of like cryptic foot sequences, and it's very, very comp style looking. Like it is very comp style. And this would be like probably a boulder that we could see copy and paste in the competition coming up. And it's not surprising that they have such well set comp style slabs and boulders up in this gym, because for those who don't know, a lot of the US team members live and train in Salt Lake. And while yes, they have their own sort of training center for the American team members, I'm sure they also go and climb in the surrounding gyms. And I guess this location of the Boulder project, I guess I don't remember who was telling us, but I guess it's really, really close to the training center, like a couple minutes or something. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of the American team members probably train in this gym and get on these boulders. So it's no wonder there's a lot of good comp style boulders up. Also, hey, check out what I'm doing with my hands right now. As you can see, my thumbs are being pointed downwards as I'm trying to do this no hands sequence. And this is, of course, the epic tip of the day that a subscriber recommended to me, and that was featured in the last episode when we were training at La Crux. And I was really trying to use it today. There are, I think, a couple more boulders later on in this episode where I use this technique, and it is really continuing to prove effective. like I was sort of saying in the last episode, I was saying that I need to really test it some more before I really buy into this new technique and try and use it all the time. And so far, the more testing I do, also this is Babette, by the way. So far, the more testing I've been doing, the more I've really been noticing like extra stability for like these no hands, foot only sequences on slab when you're like really trying to balance. I've been really liking the thumbs down, arms out technique. And like what good timing for this technique to be recommended to me by this subscriber, like right before the competition. I wonder if it will end up coming in clutch. But yeah, that was like also a good boulder to have up in the gym to try this technique and really have it reaffirmed and prove successful. So here we are moving on to another slab. This slab is super, super cool. This one was a really nicely set boulder and has like a really fun last move and some nice tricky sequences in the middle here. And I'd probably say this was like actually my favorite boulder up in the gym, which was really saying something because they had some good sets up. But yeah, I was feeling pretty good on the slab today, actually. It was definitely taking a little longer for my power to be activated because of the altitude, but my slab skills were actually feeling pretty good today. And I think I actually have to credit like just our last couple sessions at La Crux. Like we did a lot of slab in those couple days of training, and just practicing all those moves back to back to back like really got my slab skills fresh in my mind. And I think that's helping. I'm gonna try and carry these fresh slab feelings through to the competition. And so I need to basically keep up with it. And so I'm basically trying to carry the momentum, you could say, of this nice slab activation that I achieved at La Crux. And I'm gonna try and do a lot of slab here at the Boulder Project and carry my slab momentum through to the competition. That's basically the idea. So here you can see Babette is also getting a cool top of this boulder. So for all of our Canadian viewers, you should be familiar with Babette. She's on the national team, one of the strongest girls in the country, and she is also a fellow Roseblock team member and a friend of Maddie and mine. So yeah, she was also joining our Canadian crew today. So it was time for the session to start winding down, and this tricky boulder here ends up being the last boulder in the session. And honestly, there's like so many boulders to go around in this gym that I figured that we would do the rest of our training here at this gym. And this was like session 1 where we made a pretty decent dent in the boulders. Did a couple power boulders, did a lot of the tricky slabs, and then we're going to continue training here and I guess just try and tick off the boulders gradually as we get closer to the competition. So now it was time to move into our strength sort of workout, you could say. This wasn't much of a workout that I was trying to do to build strength. Obviously, this is like kind of right before the competition and there aren't actually any strength gains to be made this close to an event. But this sort of session that I'm doing right now is very important for my peaking process, I find. So what we're going to be doing in this session is just one set of all of our exercises, and we're going to be trying to go as heavy as possible. So for example, for our dips that we're doing right now, we're going to do one set of 2 reps, and I'm going to try and go as heavy as I can with the weight in order to do 2 reps. So it's not quite like a 1 rep max test. I'm going to do that like right before Vail, which is sort of going to be like the biggest peak in the year that I want to hit. When we do like our big peak, I will do 1 set, 1 rep of like all my exercises and try to hit a 1 rep max and see just exactly how strong I am. But since we're not trying to hit our absolute biggest peak for this Salt Lake North American Cup, I'm sort of doing, I'm not quite doing that 1 rep max test. So we're kind of doing our 2 rep max test, you could say. So for all of these exercises, I'm gonna see just how heavy I can go with 2 reps. So for dips, I did 88 pounds, which was pretty good. My 1 rep max is 100 pounds. So 2 reps at 88 was pretty solid. And I'm feeling confident about my dip strength going into the event. And then for jump squats that we're doing here, this is kind of the one exercise that is like kind of like an exception to this 2 rep max idea, because it's more so just how explosive I feel in the jump and not about how much weight I do. I always keep the exercise at 30 pounds and then just try and see how explosive I feel, which was pretty good today actually. Like I've been feeling like nice and explosive recently, which has been giving me confidence on my jumping ability. And then check this military press rep that I just did. So obviously that was 110 pounds, and that's actually a PB. That's the most I've ever military pressed. I have only done 100 pounds in the past, and I haven't made like a big push to try and set a new 1 rep max recently. And I find that it's also hard to kind of do it with military press because I kind of have to go up in 10-pound increments, because it's hard to find, like 47 and a half dumbbells, right? In order to do like a 105-pound press. So it's kind of tricky. I guess I could use like a regular bar and put weights on the end of it, but I do prefer the dumbbells. And then as you notice, I wasn't able to do the second rep, but that was okay because this session was more so for testing. And the other sort of idea with this style of session, especially in regards to peaking, is it's almost more neurological rather than a strength-based in terms of testing. And so I guess what I mean by that is I find, at least in my experience, it's really helpful for me to activate these neurological pathways in my muscles by basically showing them just how heavy they can execute an exercise. Because like, let's say that I don't actually do this workout, right? It doesn't change how strong I am. It doesn't change the fact that I'm actually able to execute like 110 pound military press or 2 88 pound dips, like things like this. But by actually going and executing it right before an event, especially, it basically shows my body and my brain like, hey, this is how strong you are. And this is just how much force you are able to execute. Even though, like, obviously my body kind of can already do this, but it doesn't necessarily know it. And by showing it just what it can do, I find it gives me more confidence that my body is like even more able to actually go and execute better at the event in terms of strength, right? Like it just did the heaviest military press it's ever done in its life. So when I go to my overhead press moves, my body's gonna know that it can like really execute like these movements. Same things with dips and same thing with these hangs that we're about to do. So like the same philosophy applies to this hangboard. We're gonna be doing 3 sets of 1 rep. So basically just 3 hangs, and I'll rest kind of just how long I need to in between sets. And I'm gonna try and really push the weight with this exercise too, of course. So we're gonna be I ended up doing 3 hangs at 123 pounds, which is pretty good for me. I have mentioned in the past, I think, a solid benchmark that I like to hit before like a super target event is I like to do a 135 pound hang on the small Beastmaker edge. That sort of like says to myself like, okay, my crimp strength is in the best form that it's gonna be, because 135 is my 1 rep max, and I've only done that twice, I think. So like I said, today we're not really doing our 1 rep max. I'm trying to do a weight that I can do for 3 sets. So it's not quite 135 pounds. And 123 pounds isn't bad, but I wasn't able to do all my hangs at 5 seconds, which is okay. Like the idea is to try and hit a 2 to 5 second hang for this workout. But I definitely would prefer to be hitting 5 seconds in all my hangs, and I wasn't quite able to do that. So I think my crimp strength could be a bit better right now, like big picture. But at the same time, we are at altitude and it's hard to see exactly where my power is in my body, especially in terms of my grip strength, since that was like still our second day coming and training since the travel and since the altitude. So, you know, I'll take 123 pounds with my hangs. Could be better, but it's not so bad. But yeah, overall it was a good sort of like testing session for my workout, and really good for showing my body just how strong it is so that it knows what it can go and do during event time. And that's just sort of the logic behind how I write my workouts in order to peak for an event. And when we go and hit like our super big peak around veil time, we're gonna have even more of like a gradual taper and really try and set some 1 rep maxes with all of our exercises. And we're gonna try and do that right before the event as well. And that'll be a fun process to go through. So this session that we are having here is actually, there was a rest day in between the hangboard session and the workout, in between this session. So we had the hangboard workout, then we had a rest day, and then here we are for today's day of training. And this is the day of training that is just 1 session. Like I said, we're like really trying to taper down the volume in order to peak for this event. So we just have 1 session on the program, super chill, fun day of training. And it's always very satisfying to just go and do 1 session and feel nice and fresh after. So that's the idea with today's session on the program. And so check out this boulder that we are trying here. So this boulder, we obviously put a couple tries on during our first session climbing at this gym, but it was a bit too physical to really work properly. So I moved on from it pretty fast. And I was feeling definitely a lot better in this session. So we're actually working it for real. And so as I am working this boulder, I'm realizing that probably the hardest individual move is this last move. And that's just because this sort of sloper that we're jumping off of to the finish hold is pretty bad. It's got like a bit of a thumb catch on it, which is definitely helping, but it's still not feeling super comfortable and easy to hold. And it feels like a pretty desperate move going out to the finish. But what you're gonna notice on this next attempt is actually a previous tip of the day of mine that I've used, but it's been a while and we have a lot of new viewers since I last did this tip of the day. And so I'm going to recycle it for today's episode. And so this tip of the day is the twisted thumb grip. So what you're going to notice on this next attempt of mine is I'm about to do the last move quite casually, especially compared to my previous attempts where it didn't look like I was very close to holding this last move at all. And that is because this tip of the day is one of my favorites for sure. Like when you find a situation where you can apply this technique, it really works effectively. And so like I said, this is the twisted thumb grip. And basically the idea with this tip of the day is this usually comes into play when you have thumb catches on the edge or the crease of a volume, such as this scenario. So this thumb catch isn't quite at the crease, like the very lip of the hold where we're actually grabbing it. It's obviously a little bit lower, but it still kind of feels like a narrow pinch. Like it still kind of feels almost awkward to use this thumb catch and feel like really strong in this pinching position. Whereas if it was like a bit wider and my hand was like extended more, it would feel more ergonomic and I would actually be able to squeeze it more effectively and it would feel like a better hold. And so a way that you can kind of achieve this effect in your hand of having your palm being a bit more open and feeling stronger is by, instead of squeezing it in the narrow pinch position that it would be, you twist your thumb inwards, and there's a few reasons that this position is going to feel stronger on a hold like this. One, it's sort of, because you're kind of almost shortening your thumb, it creates the same effect as opening your hand would. And it basically uses, at least in my opinion, if I feel like it uses stronger muscles in my palm and like my pinching strength when I, in theory, shorten my thumb by twisting my thumb inwards and having the hold rest against kind of like the side of my thumb. So I feel like it engages like stronger muscles in my hand when I grab the pinch like this. And what it also does is it actually you get more skin and more surface area of your finger on the thumb catch when you do this. So when I kind of just pinch the hold straight on in this narrow grip, I'm only kind of getting the tip of my thumb on the thumb catch, but it's actually kind of a long thumb catch, and I could be getting more surface area with my skin if I wanted to. So by twisting my thumb inwards, now instead of just getting this little tip of thumb on the thumb catch, I get all of this surface area, and I basically get like just more bang for my buck out of my thumb. And I get kind of stronger muscles engaged, and now I also get more surface area. And basically it turns this pinch into a bucket, and it just feels like so much better, and it feels way easier to do this last move. And I'm sure I have like a little graphic of the previous tip of the day that I used this this technique in, but I'll also link the last episode where I did this tip of the day for the first time, and it was another great example of a hold that was feeling like impossible to use, and then as soon as I do this technique, it's like, get out of here. It's like it turns into such a good hold. It's crazy. So in terms of like when to identify like a hold to use this sort of technique on, I find it's usually when you have a thumb catch that's added to a hold or volume, and it feels like it's a narrow pinch. When it's feeling like a narrow pinch with a thumb catch, try the twisted thumb grip and see if it helps. And especially on thumb catches that are kind of long. Like this one is kind of long. It's in between being long and like a tiny little chip, but that also helps because you get more surface area. So yeah, the twisted thumb grip, super epic tip of the day technique that I like to use from time to time, and it can really be a game changer. So here we are going to try the last move again, and it has finally occurred to me to try the twisted thumb grip on the second last hold, and just watch just how easy it goes now. So something about this grip, I guess I should also mention, is it feels kind of awkward. Like it feels kind of awkward to go and set my thumb in that position. It doesn't feel necessarily ergonomic, but it feels more secure and it feels more effective. And I find that with a lot of like sort of obscure climbing techniques, the reason they're obscure and maybe not everybody has heard of them is because they're awkward. And this, while this technique is awkward, it is definitely effective, and I would definitely recommend trying it. It really helped me on this boulder. Also, speaking of this boulder, I guess I haven't mentioned, this thing is also like super fire. Like this sequence on this boulder is very, very cool. I was really impressed with the setting here at the Boulder Project. Really, really cool, like variations of styles and some cool movements. It was like classic American style with a bit of comp style flair, like spiced in with it. Like for example, this boulder that we're trying here is a very, very American style boulder. And I have kind of also grown up climbing in the States throughout my competitive career, especially when I was in youth. I have always been coming and doing a lot of events in the States. And that also involves like, training the week leading up to a competition or whatnot. So I've definitely done my fair share of climbing in the US, and I have gotten a bit accustomed to this American style of climbing, which is like, long physical boulders, like power endurance based boulders for sure. And this style of climbing is also very difficult to do at altitude. And I was finding that I was really struggling with these American power endurance style boulders, such as this one. But I think that it's actually quite effective for me to be training on these styles of boulders right before the event, because we're at altitude. It's good to sort of train on these power endurance style boulders and really kind of expedite my body, like getting my cardio really up up to speed with altitude. By doing all of these super long, physically intensive boulders and just like getting pumped and out of breath every time I'm trying them, it's really helping my body get to the fitness level that it needs to be super, super fast in time for the comp. So that's why I'm going and doing all of these sort of route climbs, you could say. And it's really difficult, honestly, at first. Like, it's like, oh man, especially in the previous day of training, I wasn't even close to being able to do the power endurance boulders. But after, putting some reps in on some of them, I already noticed quite a big improvement today on the super physical power endurance style boulders. And then hopefully with a few more reps of the power endurance boulders in my system, I'll just be like my cardio will be like super fit feeling and like ready to go and execute at the comp, and the altitude will be less of a problem, hopefully. And like I was saying, like this gym has got a whole lot of good different styles up. Like here we've got a boulder that was a nice escape from all of the power endurance. And I wasn't getting too pumped on this boulder. Actually, that's not true. Even the boulders that weren't super power endurance based, I found myself getting pumped on like my send goes near the end, even on a boulder like this, just because the altitude does that to you. Like it will get you pumped on boulders that you normally wouldn't be getting pumped on. And it's like, it's like the theme of all of this training is like, thank goodness I decided to come to Salt Lake nice and early to acclimatize, because trying to compete in this condition would just be like no chance. So yeah, I feel myself getting more accustomed throughout all these sessions. And this boulder that we're trying here, oh, actually I forgot to mention, so check out my left hand here. I'm actually doing the twisted thumb grip again on this boulder. So the crux of this boulder kind of revolved around the start hold. It's like really, really bad and awkward to pinch. It was like a really difficult hold to use. And I actually end up using the twisted thumb grip in order to do it. And it definitely helped, but it wasn't like locked in feeling like that last boulder where we were using the twisted thumb grip. Like it turned the overhanging boulder pinch into like a bucket. But this start hold was like still so bad that even with the twisted thumb grip, it was a really, really difficult first move on this boulder. And but it helped just enough to be able to do it. And then here, check this out, this top out. I thought I was gonna fall on this top out. I thought it was gonna be another classic Zach can't do a top out boulder, but I managed to beached whale myself above the wall, thankfully. I think I should honestly take like 20 minutes of a session at some point and practice topping out. While yes, it's like you don't really see it in comp style bouldering, you do have like these sort of one-off events where you'll find a top out, or maybe in like a scramble qualification round, there's like a top out. I think it's important that I at least know how to do it like decently well, and I don't always just feel like I'm absolutely failing every time I try to top out a boulder. Because I feel like that top out that I just did was like a really easy top out, and yet I felt like I was cruxing out. So I should take the time to like really just learn how to top out properly. But anyway, here we are moving on to another 5-star slab. Like I was saying, I was really looking forward to the climbing on the slabs up in this gym because they all looked super sick. And this one was no exception. This one was really, really cool, really well set, and super comp style. And this boulder was like a really good opportunity for me to get some more practice in with these new shoes and really just feel confident on the slab and all styles of climbing in these shoes right before the event. And honestly, after all of the slab climbing that we did, like in today's episode and even in the last episode in the Crux, I'm very confident in these shoes. I feel like I was able to learn them very, very fast and make the transition from the VSRs, the Instinct VSRs to these Tomoe Narasaki Pros in just like 5 or 6 sessions. probably one of the fastest instances that I can recall of me like saying, okay, I'm gonna switch shoes, like switch brands, and really learn a different style of shoe and then find it comfortable. I found that I did a good job of really expediting the process, and I feel confident in these shoes now, and I definitely want to go compete in them, and I feel good about them. So I'm excited to put them to the test. So anyway, we've been continuously trying this boulder, and I have finally realized something that was like I've been thinking about this for a while, and I finally realized it today. This move where we do like the foot hop into like the clamp with your other foot, and you jump into kind of this pincer position, I'm realizing that I hate this move. Like, this is probably my least favorite new school comp style move. It is just so annoying, and I'm not good at it. And I think I kind of understand the movement, but I've been failing on it so much recently that I don't think I do. And I just hope this move stops being trendy, because I don't like climbing on it, and I'm not good at it. And even I've like practiced it quite a lot, and I still don't really understand it. So I hope setters get sick of that move. But it was good I had some good practice on that last boulder, and I feel like I learned a little bit more about it on that last boulder, but I don't know. I'm definitely realizing that it's a weakness of mine for sure. So here we are, moving on to the next day of training. So like I said, that last session that we just did was just a single session of bouldering, no double session. On that day, we're trying to feel nice and fresh for the comp, so it's important to taper down our volume. So here we are moving on into the next day of training, and it is going to be the exact same thing, just one session of bouldering. And this one is even going to be a little bit shorter than yesterday. So yesterday's session was 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then this one is just simply 1 hour of bouldering, one session, nice, short and sweet. And it's just kind of like, keep the body activated and fresh, and, not feeling so stiff going into the comp. Like, I know that a lot of athletes like to do like 2 days of rest before competition, whereas me, I prefer 1 day of rest before competition, but the day before that day of rest will be like a super light day, which is today, right? So instead of taking 2 days of rest before the event, I basically have 1 day of rest, but that first day is like barely any climbing because it's so little that it almost may as well be 2 days of rest. But I find that it just helps me feel a little less stiff on comp day and sort of easier to activate. If I have too much rest, then I find I might be feeling stiff and my body might be feeling sort of dormant. So I prefer to do training still close to the event, but just less of it. And that's the way that I taper and peak for a competition. So this boulder here that we are trying now, as you can see, has kind of like a sit start. We started with just doing the stand start, and then I wanted to try the sit, and this was going to be the ultimate test of like the sort of cardio progress and endurance progress that we've made over these couple days of training. So if I was able to do the sit start boulder of this in its entirety, then I think we're good. I think my endurance is where it needs to be, and my cardio is where it needs to be. And luckily I was indeed able to send this boulder from the low start, which was very pumpy. By the time I got to the end there, my chest was like on fire, definitely breathing really hard, super pumped. And yeah, that was satisfying. I think I'm good to go in terms of physicality for the weekend, and that's good. I feel like we came to Salt Lake the perfect amount of time in advance before the event, and we had like some really good sessions to get the body activated. And so at this point, there were definitely still some physical white tapes left up in the gym, but they were doing like a lot of setting on these couple days of training. And so there were a couple boulders that I didn't really get to like physical looking white tapes, but I wasn't too upset. The boulders that were left in the gym were kind of like some crimp lines, nothing too comp style or necessarily epic looking. So I'd done sort of all of the A-list boulders up in the gym, you could say. So I decided to finish off this last comp prep session with just like a few nice moderate slabs. Really try and carry that slab momentum that I was talking about all the way up into the comp day. Like, it's important even on the very last session to make sure I get on some slabs, some different style moves, really get that fresh feeling of balance right in my mind right up until the last second. And that is what we achieve. Even the lower grading of the slabs up in this gym were really quality and really tricky. Like these blue boulders that we're doing are probably like around V6 boulders or something, but the movements were unique and tricky and technical and quite good to practice on, especially for this comp prep that I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, shout out to the Salt Lake Boulder Project for having some really awesome sets up. And I really enjoyed my few sessions training in this gym. So yeah, now like next up is gonna be the first like important competition of the season coming up. The Salt Lake North American Cup that we're about to participate in is probably like number 2 in terms of priority of the whole year for me, which is definitely like, that's a big one. Number 1 would probably be Vail, just because that's such a crazy cool event, and I'm gonna put like 100% focus on that one for sure. But Salt Lake is definitely number 2 in terms of importance for me. Like I definitely want to do well in the North American Cups to earn points and make my way back up in the Canadian rankings, and in order to like qualify for World Cups again. But I wouldn't say that's even necessarily my primary source of motivation for these North American Cups. I like the events just for themselves. Like I want to do well in these events just for the sake of doing well in the North American Cup. And I don't necessarily feel like extra pressure to try and make the Canadian World Cup team again, which I think is like a healthy way of going into these events. So that's nice. But yeah, anyway, tried that white boulder a couple more times, couldn't quite do it. And that wrapped up all of our training sessions here at the Boulder Project. So now I have 1 day of rest, and then the next day is going to be the qualifying for the competition. I'm definitely sure I'll be able to get video of the event. I have some people here with me that can videotape for me. So anyway, here's another long ass video for you. I apologize for that. And if you are still watching, thank you. You're a real one. But anyway, yeah, day of rest tomorrow and then comp day. Tune in for that. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a really big event, competitive event, strong people, going to be exciting. And we're going to kick off my comp season very soon. Insert catchy video outro here.